SpaceForce.com.
Ignition sequence.
We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard.
One small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
1, 0, and liftoff.
Mission complete, Houston. After serving the world for over 30 years, the space shuttle's earned its place in history and it's come to a final stop.
Astronauts have been coming to NASA's Kennedy Space Center in Florida for 30 years to practice launch day aboard a space shuttle. Monday, June 20th, saw the arrival of the last crew to take part in the dress rehearsal. Its meaning was not lost on the astronauts.
I think I speak for the whole crew. We're very honored to be in this position. There's many people who could be here. We just happened to, when the dice fell, we were, our names were facing up. So we consider ourselves fortunate, lucky.
Chris Ferguson, Doug Hurley, Sandy Magnus, and Rex Walheim flew to Kennedy aboard T-38s to begin 4 days of intense training known as the Terminal Countdown Demonstration Test. Ferguson and Hurley, who will be at the controls of Space Shuttle Atlantis during launch and landing, practiced touching down at Kennedy's shuttle landing facility using the shuttle training aircraft to simulate the shuttle's unique characteristics. Day 2 saw the astronauts take turns driving one of the M113s that will be stationed near the launch complex when they lift off. In the unlikely event of an emergency, the astronauts would climb inside the M113 to drive away from danger. The crew got an up-close look at Atlantis as it stood on Launch Pad 39A on the third day of TCDT. Included a detailed walk-down of the cargo bay, where they saw their primary payload, the Raffaello Multipurpose Logistics Module, or MPLM. Raffaello will be loaded with experiments, equipment, and supplies for the International Space Station. Once in orbit, the STS-135 astronauts will work with the station residents to unload the module and fill it up with concluded experiments and other items that are no longer needed on the station.
It's a pleasure to be here, and especially right in front of the space shuttle. Just gives you goosebumps thinking that we're going to get to ride that in about 2 weeks.
The training is rich in tradition and history, and the astronauts do not take its lessons for granted.
It's just a very comprehensive, hands-on, at the place you're going to do it kind of training, and it's invaluable. I mean, you can do all the simulators in the world, but until you get in that real vehicle, touch the vehicle, see what you can reach, see the different switches, everything's just a little bit different when you're in the real vehicle. So it's a great way to get you ready for the launch day when it counts.
Their last day opened with a full dress rehearsal for launch day, targeted for July 8th. The astronauts pulled on their launch and entry suits, took their seats aboard Atlantis' flight deck, and ran through a countdown simulation.
We're just the tip of the iceberg of a huge group of people who plan and get the hardware ready and prepare our procedures and then watch over the vehicle while we're on board. And we feel very, very strongly that we have to be prepared as possible to perform the mission to the extent that they're expecting of us. And I think when it's all done, we can all celebrate together, not only just the mission, but the whole program.
I think, and we haven't talked about this, I think each of us feels a little perhaps extra burden to make sure that we put on the best possible face forward for the last go around of this. And the crew's very prepared. We're going to go out and do a fantastic job. And like I said, when it's all over at the very end, I think that's when it's good. The enormity of it is going to hit us. That last wheel stop call is going to be a little tough.
After lunch and a review of the equipment they will use in space, Ferguson, Hurley, Magnus, and Walheim boarded their jets and returned to NASA's Johnson Space Center in Houston. They are to return July 4th for the final flight of the shuttle's 30-year history.
Why the fuck you lying? Why you always lying? Oh my God, stop your fucking lying. Why the fuck you lying? Why you always lying? Oh my God, stop your fucking lying. Why the fuck you lying? Why you always lying? Oh my God, stop your fucking lying.
This is Shuttle Launch Control. We are now taking live pictures of Discovery's astronauts in the crew quarters at the Operations Checkout Building as they are getting into their orange launch and entry suits and preparing for their trip out to the pad. It's pilot Jim Dutton being assisted with his orange Aces suit, getting the gloves on. Mission Specialist 1, Rick Mastracchio, looking at ease, confident, and ready to fly today. And Clay Anderson, Mission Specialist number 5, a veteran of a long-duration space station flight, getting ready for his mission. He'll be one of 2 spacewalkers along with Rick Mastracchio on STS-131. Mission Specialist number 3, Stephanie Wilson. She's a veteran of 2 space flights, STS-121 and STS-120. Thumbs up, she's ready to go. And our Japan Aerospace Exploration Agency astronaut, Naoko Yamazaki. A big wave for the cameras and a thumbs up. She's one of 3 Discovery women astronauts who will be joining a female aboard the International Space Station. There's Dottie Metcalf Lindenberger. She's Mission Specialist number 2, making her first space flight. She's a former high school science teacher turned astronaut, and she looks very excited. And we see the astronauts for Discovery's STS-131 mission waving at the camera. Excited to be heading towards the elevator. That means they'll be on their way out to the launch pad aboard the Astrovan shortly. Several management astronauts in trailing them. Over 100 news media await the arrival of Discovery's crew, and here they are.
Hands, get back, get back.
Fifth grade, I had a teacher, Mr. Hargrove, who told me, you know, if you work hard, you will be a great engineer.
I had another physical chemistry teacher at the time at UCLA that looked like he had just stepped out of mission control.
Even starting in my middle school days, I had a group of teachers that were just phenomenal in 6th grade.
The most influential teacher in my life was my mother. She taught for 45 years She taught in the sciences and math, and she was kind of, and still remains my biggest inspiration.
I've had lots of very influential teachers. You know, one that comes to mind was even my band director when I was in high school.
I will never forget my physics teacher, Mr. Beatty.
I had lots of influential teachers. The very first one I remember was my first grade teacher, who taught us about the scientific method.
I could name every teacher I had from kindergarten through high school. And it's because they all had something a little bit different to contribute.
He made us come in and pick up our midterms in person and went over our exams with us. And all this many years later, I still remember having to explain my mistakes to him.
But it was his belief in me and setting that standard that he lit a fire that burns bright to this day. And I went to college and studied engineering because of what he said to me in 5th grade.
They kind of got me on the right track, I think, mentally, academically, being able to succeed and believe in myself that I could succeed.
She was explaining that the first thing you want to do is go out and observe the universe around you and then make observations.
I had a few teachers in high school that really believed in me. You know, one of them was a PE teacher, one of them was a math teacher.
I was thankful to that particular teacher for helping me to focus on his class, but also just helping me focus in my high school career as well.
You could always say to him, Mr. Beatty, I don't understand that. Can you demonstrate that or illustrate that? And he was only too happy to illustrate it and show you what he meant by it.
I had a science teacher in high school who was pretty amazing because he taught so many things. He taught biology, he taught physics, he taught a physiology course, he taught an advanced science projects course. He was kind of like a one-man science guy.
He asked me if I'd seen a falling star, and I said, no, sir, I hadn't. And he proceeded to help me derive the equations for when would be the best time to go see one. And I still remember being on orbit in the shuttle and seeing 2 meteors go below me and wishing he were still alive so I could tell him, I bet you didn't think of that one.
What was really neat about them is that when I said I wanted to be an astronaut or I wanted to go to West Point, these are big dreams for a girl from a small town like me. And nobody ever said I couldn't do it. And then I had these great teachers that said I can do it.
She got us all up and we marched out into the middle of the neighborhood around us and took our field notebooks out and started taking notes. And I felt like a scientist that day.
He would give you enough facts to learn the basics, and then you had to go do something in the form of a project to round out your education on it. And that was really awesome because that's what I've been doing ever since.
Why the fuck you lying? Why you always lying? Oh my God, stop your fucking lying. Why the fuck you lying? Why you always lying? Oh my God, stop your fucking lying.